With the escalating threats, the violence we're seeing in America, some of it coming from Donald Trump's federal government, some of it coming from elsewhere. The big news today is something that no one wants to see in the powder keg of Minnesota, but a brand new attack on a lawmaker. Now, that's bad no matter what. If that's all you heard, that should be enough to know that's a bad thing. And there have been times in the past few decades where people would all acknowledge in leadership that that was bad. But because this is a Democratic lawmaker, this government has had a different type of response. The president, who has talked about, quote, a slight de-escalation or changing his tone, isn't doing that. And we measure these things over time. You don't get to dial up the pressure, the rhetoric, the violence, unleash actual violence against American citizens, 2 now slain, then take a break for a day or two, claim that's de-escalation, and then go back to attacking people in ways that are misleading and incendiary when we have these open probes. There is also no indication that these federal agents operating under Trump's orders, ICE, DHS, and the rest, are scaling back. There's heat in Minnesota. Democratic Congresswoman Ilhan Omar attacked last night at a town hall, as you see here. This man sprayed her with an unknown substance. If you are on the receiving end of something like that, it is at a minimum extremely scary because you actually don't know what you're being hit with. You can see how it unfolded. This was moments after she was calling for Kristi Noem's resignation. Here's the moment.
And DHS Secretary Kristi Noem must resign or face impeachment. I don't know.
Oh my God, he sprayed something on her.
That was the scene. There's a close-up of what looked like a syringe with the substance. Again, thankfully, she seems to be okay, and we have that reporting. But in the moment, what we're talking about here is a very menacing act, and you don't know what's in it. He's been arrested and charged with third-degree assault. The Congresswoman says she is okay, and she will not let these kind of attacks win. Our colleague Chris Hayes is in Minnesota, where he has been reporting. He just interviewed the Congresswoman, a very newsworthy interview, and he joins us in our coverage here on this program in a few moments. The president would not lower the temperature or afford her any kind of the grace that he has called others to treat his side with when they have faced horrific attacks or even violence, or in some cases killings recently, which are all abhorrent. Instead, he didn't live up to his own test, and he made statements that I'm not going to report on in detail here, just except to tell you that they were evidence-free. But as for what they were, they don't make our standards as reporting part of our news coverage because they have no basis in truth. But you should know that he's being dishonest about what happened on the very first day it happened, failing his own tests and any normal leadership. And of course, he's in charge of the federal government that is supposed to prosecute any violence, whether it's against the American people or their lawmakers and elected officials. More on that in a moment. MAGA fans have been spreading misinformation. All this after federal agents shot down 2 Americans, protesters slain in broad daylight. The Trump administration says the agents involved in the Preddy shooting have now been placed on leave. And there's a lot of pushback. There are Minnesota business leaders and companies calling for the federal government to at least do the bare minimum of the normal cooperation with state officials into what happened, because avoiding or defying that makes it look like a cover-up. And these officials, these business leaders, are concerned that that means we won't necessarily get to the bottom of this. A handful of Republicans also raising their voices.
Americans don't want to see people killed in the streets. And Americans don't want to see the kind of hunting down people in a way that really demeans the process.
No American believes that he was assaulting the officers. In fact, the opposite appears to be true. So we have to get some rules of the game.
Stephen Miller never fails to live up to my expectations of incompetence.
None of this happens in a vacuum. We have data that the threats against lawmakers jumped not 10 or 20%, but about 58% in the last year. And so how did we get here in America? What is happening now? Well, one giant, obvious problem is that the president of the United States has come out for political violence repeatedly. And he's come out against the safety of police. He's come out for the convicts who attacked police and for the convicts who tried to threaten, menace, hurt, hang, assassinate, or kill lawmakers in both parties. The president would have people believe and wants everyone to see this as some partisan war, blue states and red, but it's not even that. And by the way, all violence is wrong if it targeted a Republican, a Democrat, or for whatever reason. But it happens that a lot of this violence has been waged against both parties, against Mike Pence, for example, and against Nancy Pelosi. And the president blessed the attacks. He pardoned those Jan 6 convicts. Remember Senator Josh Hawley, who, like Donald Trump, had made a public show of being open to what those Jan 6 protesters were planning? And that was, of course, before they actually stormed the Capitol, sending him and other Republicans running quite literally for their lives. Thank goodness we don't know what would have happened if the angry mob found lawmakers or found Republican Mike Pence or found Democrat Nancy Pelosi. Again, the titles and parties don't matter except to remind you that this was violence against all kinds of elected officials. As the violence today still needs to be investigated, the wider context is that Donald Trump not only encouraged, blessed, rewarded, cheered this on, but literally freed people who had many years left to serve in prison. That's why Donald Trump is one of the most anti-police presidents we have. And if that kind of cuts against how he talks, well, remember, he's been caught lying about all kinds of things. So he may have messaged something else. He's also very much against free speech, trying to cancel the shows of people he disagrees with, trying to abuse power that way, suing everybody. He's one of the most anti-First Amendment presidents we've had, at least in the first year of the second term. We can measure these things. So you have to put aside the PR propaganda and remember, this is a president who has taken the side of criminal convicted violence against lawmakers and taken the side of those against police. Is it any wonder we have a public safety problem in this country that is coming from the federal government, or that we have people who think, some of them, I can't speak to exactly today yet, that investigation's ongoing, but in general, you can find message boards on the internet full of people who think that violence is okay because their president said so and he pardoned them last time and maybe he'll do it again. That's the wider context. When punishment is gone, deterrence is gone. We have a president who is anti-police, is for government violence against the people, and has failed in one of the prime duties of any president, one he said he would try to fulfill: law and order. Law enforced equally to prevent and punish violence so that we might have order. And as about 58% plus of Americans have noticed, we don't have order in the places where Donald Trump is most involved in putting agents in the streets. What we have, as a factual matter, are slain Americans and questions of a cover-up that goes to the top of this White House.